Welcome to our web development class. And I would like to further explain some of the principles behind responsive design. What I have here is a regular website, and I have some information in the website so that you can get more of an understanding of what's going on. So we have a 960 pixel fixed width. It is centered to the browser page. The left column is 640, the right column is 320. I do not have any borders, margins, padding, etc., because we would have to deal with them in the responsive layout. The lines you see are done using the CSS outline property, which do not add to the overall width. But for now, we will get the overall basic concept down. As I start moving the browser and making it smaller, eventually you're going to see a horizontal scroll bar. That is the giveaway that it is not optimized for mobile, or at least that it is not coded in a responsive layout. So now let's take a look at the responsive layout. In this demo, I am using the max width property. Since we already have the website, it will work well. However, I also have coded the same example using min width, and that code is available to you. So let's take a look at the HTML first. And I am using the Komodo editor, and I will scroll down. Here is my outer div, ID equals container. Here is the header section with an ID of header. This is where I'm writing the information. I have two sections, the left-hand column, the right-hand column, and the footer. So we're starting out with a very simple layout to show you the concepts. In my embedded style sheet, I have default properties. So in other words, these are all the properties that were set, all the styles that were set prior to the media queries. So these are the styles that were used for the desktop layout. One thing that I want to point out is when you're working with style sheets, there is always this concept of inheritance and the cascading order of precedence, even with the media queries. So because these are our basic styles, they will also be inherited by the media queries unless they are overridden. And that is the heart and soul of responsive design, to start overriding some of the properties and changing them to give the responsive layout. And in a responsive design, the main thing that you're changing are the widths. Ultimately, you'll be needing to do some changing with padding and margins also. But here we're just essentially working with the widths. And notice that we have no more horizontal scroll bar, but our columns are now a percentage. So you go from fixed width to percents. You don't do additional fixed widths for your different breakpoints. You go down into percents. And this is going to be emphasized again in chapter 3. So let's go back to the code. All right, so everything here will be inherited, and then we change what needs to be changed. And because we're starting with an existing website, I'm going to use max width in my media queries as it works better. All right, because this is coded for a 960 width, I'm starting 1 pixel below. So anything under 960, here's my max width in my media query. So here's my media query here. And remember, max width scales down. It's saying that anything 959 or under, these styles will apply. Now, these styles are overriding existing styles. They don't necessarily always have to override. You can add things also. So for example, I'm adding the color red to my outer container. And I like working with colors because you can see it right away. Now I'm changing the width. The width was 960. Here again, I'm changing it to a percent. I'm also changing my left column to a percent and my right column to a percent. And these percents work very well. Essentially, we're looking at a 2/3 and a 1/3 based on the original 960. So these rules will take effect unless we encounter another breakpoint, which we do in our next media query. So here's our next media query with a max width of 700. At this point, our layout will change based on what styles are being set. And here again, we're only setting it for the main container. All right, we're setting the color blue, which here will override the color red. We're setting the width to 100%, which will override this width. And we're setting the margin to 0 pixels for the container element, which will override our margin right up here. Remember, we had these centered. So essentially what I'm doing at under 960, we're just changing the percents. It's still centered and we still have right and left margins. As we get narrower, for example, now we're kind of going into the tablets, we don't need those right and left margins. Everything can fit 100%. So we're changing that layout. Our last media query, and we only have 3, is when we hit 600 pixels. And at this point, we're getting kind of small. Now, in my container, I'm only changing the color to green so that I can see it, meaning we are keeping the width of 100 and the margins to 0. Remember, everything is still inherited. In the event of a conflict, okay, the precedence will apply. So here we have a conflict with color, and in this case, green will take over from blue. Now, what we're doing here is we are eliminating the float. And this is one of the big things that you do in responsive layout. Most of our websites have columns. They're done using floats. And what you do is when you get down to that small device width, the floats no longer look good. You want to remove them. All right, so here we're setting the float none. And not only that, we're putting our width to 100% on both the left and the right. And these are overriding the default that is right up here. Okay, well, the default here for float left, the default here for float left, and also these default. Remember, at 959, we changed from a pixel to a percent. And these widths held for our first media query and for our second media query. And now we are changing them for our last media query right down here. All right, so let's take a look in the browser. And let me just refresh. And here again, I have the information so you can see what's happening at different points. One thing I would like to point out, I am in Firefox. And if I go to my menu here, and I go down to Developer, and I go down to Responsive Design View, I get this nice little tool that shows me exactly where I am. So you can actually see your breakpoints happening. And you want to grab onto this guy here. All right, so here's my original. Here we are up here at 1152. And we're concerned with the width, not the height. And what is my breakpoint? My breakpoint is 959. So as you can see, as I scroll, there we go. I just went change to 959. Now I'm at 960, 61. It's back to normal, although you really can't see any margins. All right, so here we are. And notice I changed the color to red to make it easy to see. So at 959, we changed to red, 90% centered with margins. We still have our floats, but now our columns are percents. Therefore, we eliminate the horizontal scroll bar. You don't want to have fixed widths anymore. Fixed widths are only for the desktop. Now as I scroll, Notice how responsive the content is inside my columns because it's a percent. And we're going to stay here until we hit our 700 breakpoint. And at that point, we're eliminating the margins. There we are. And I also made it blue. Now everything is a tight fit. And we have one more breakpoint at 600. At that point, we eliminate the floats and our, our left section and right section are one on top of each other. And I also changed the the color of the font so that you can see it. I'm not sure how to make this thing scroll. Sorry. Okay. Let's put it back. Let's go back into our code. Now, there's a reason, and here again, when you're using max width, remember, because of inheritance, the default styles are inherited by everyone. Then we have the first high breakpoint, the next high breakpoint, etc. Supposing I were to take this media query here for the max width of 700 pixels, take it out, Control X, put it on top of my 959 breakpoint. Are we going to have a problem? Yeah, we are. All right. What's going to happen? The browser is going to read. Remember, the browser reads from the top down. And after that, it's all stored in his memory. It's like overwriting a file. The last thing it remembers is what happens. Okay, it reads the max width of 700, but then it reads a higher max width. All right, now remember, max width scales down. So 959 and down will still accommodate 700. Okay, it's going to accommodate everything until we hit the next breakpoint, which is going to be 600. So this will never happen. That's the color blue. So let's take a look and see if I'm right. I'm going to reload. I'm just going to close this. Well, maybe I can reload it up here. Here we go. There we go. I just reloaded it. Very good. This is our normal site. Notice up here, 1146. And that breakpoint was 700. Going down, going down, going down. All right, we're going to hit our 959 breakpoint. There it is. If I go down to the 700 breakpoint, not going to happen. Look, there we go. And when I hit the 600 breakpoint, now we're going to change. So this is something I just want to point out. They can be a little tricky, and remember, it's not necessarily that your syntax is wrong, it's that your logic is wrong, and this happens to me all the time. And what I want to emphasize is write 1 or 2 lines of code and test. Don't sit down there and crank out 3 media queries at once and then wonder why nothing's working. Test little by little. And this is a very nice little tool in Firefox.